Champagne is popping. We're all high-fiving. I've never been so happy in my entire life. I just closed single-handedly the biggest deal at Zola, the company I was working at. I was the lead sales rep and I had taken that thing from prospecting all the way to closing. Now what's so amazing about this, it's not just that it was the biggest deal, that's not actually that important in the scheme of things. It's that 5 years ago I would have told you, no way in hell will I ever be the person who sells and closes a big deal. And that's fundamentally because I didn't believe in selling. In fact, I hated it. Raise your hand if, when you think of a used car salesman, that's really what you think about when you think of selling. Yeah, so a fair number of us. And this was how I was born and raised. I thought selling was a lie. It was when you told someone something that they wanted to hear, and then you made them buy a product they didn't need. It was about trickery. It was about deceit. So in college, even though I was studying economics, I was studying business, I always said, no, I'll never go into sales. I viewed it as a dishonest career. So I've told you now about a time in my life where I love selling, and I've told you about the rest of my life where, for the most part, I hated it. So how do you get from A to B? And that's part of what I'm going to tell you today, but I'm also going to tell you how selling can fundamentally change and improve your life, even if you're not a salesperson. So the scene is, I'm 25 years old, and I'm in my second year at the GSB. And I meet who will be a lifelong mentor to me, this crazy guy, Barry Ryan. And he's teaching a class called The Fundamentals of Effective Selling, and his whole thing is curiosity. And he starts making me apply this in my curriculum and outside of class. And at first I really hate it because it's something I don't believe in. But I start to realize that these questions and things that he's making me ask actually work. And if I believe in them and I try it and I do it with authenticity, they work a lot better. And so over the course of that class, and Barry will always laugh when I tell him this, I really learned that selling is not about this deceit or this dishonesty, it's about genuine curiosity. And when you're pitching, you're not actually selling someone an idea and you're not making them take information that you're giving them, you're actually creating something with someone. You're engaging them. And this totally reframed for me how I thought about selling. Because all of a sudden it wasn't a dishonest process. It was one where me and someone else were together working on a path of mutual discovery and figuring out if there was a way for us to work together. I'll be honest, sometimes there are ways that it's not going to be good for you to work together. And if you're a good person and a good salesperson, you'll admit to those. But a lot of times, if you don't ask and you don't discover and you don't go on that process, you're actually going to miss out on a lot of potential that you two could have both benefited from. And when I started thinking about it this way, I started seeing how selling applied not just in my job, but in my entire life. How it was changing my relationships with my husband, how it was affecting how I built friendships, how I communicated vision, and went on the daily tasks of my life. How I was able to apply genuine curiosity was really improving for me the way I could get the most out of my existence. And so that's why I'm here today, and that's why I'm here for you. A lot of you are very successful in this room and you're not going to go on to be salespeople. But I'm going to argue that if you don't approach the world with genuine curiosity, if you don't appreciate what it takes to bring your full value and full self, and realize that that's something that people will benefit from and that you can mutually benefit with each other and other people, you're going to be doing yourself a disservice. The funny thing about curiosity is that even though we think it's an important part of life, there are a lot of Harvard Business School articles about how curiosity is critical to leadership and innovation. We're fundamentally not a very curious society anymore. When do you think you're the most curious? For those of you that have kids, I guarantee you know that it's between the ages of 3 to 5, when all you're asked on an incessant basis is the question, why? Why is the sky blue? Oh, because of this. Why is that? Why is that? Did you know that the average 4-year-old asks a question 300 times a day? That same child at the age of 11 will only ask 10 questions a day. And that number will continue to go down as they get older. And the reason for that is that we start applying mental models and we think we've actually come up with our answers. But these are only the answers that we have. We don't have the other information that motivates other people. We don't know how other things work. And so fundamentally we're missing out on all of that on an ongoing basis. And so how do you do this? How do you apply selling? I've talked a lot about curiosity and these things, and I'm going to run through this quickly, and then I'll tell you an example of how it really impacted me in life in a way that wasn't a selling situation, but a way that I think can affect all of you. The first thing to do is this mindset that we talked about. And it's to accept a very simple truth, which even though it sounds simple, I find that very few people are willing to take. And that's, you don't know what you don't know. And I'll repeat that. It sounds obvious. You don't know what you don't know. Often when I teach this, people say, yeah, Chloe, I get it. If there are things I don't know, I don't know. But no, you don't. Do you realize that to actually understand where you can add value, you have to ask the question of, what are the things that I'm missing? What are the other things I could think about? Have you ever been rejected for a job or rejected for anything? Yeah, of course you have. Did you follow up and ask why? Did you follow up and understand what were the gaps that in your resume or in yourself or in your application to understand what were causing those gaps, and did you follow up on those? Because if you didn't, I hate to tell it to you, but you actually don't know what you don't know. You didn't dig deep enough, and you lost out on that learning that you could have had. And that's what I want you to change. I want you to realize that the first answer isn't the full answer. And so I'll show you a quick framework here, but in selling we talk about something called preliminaries, objection handling, showing your compelling benefit, and then closing. And you can look these up in any sales book. This is one called Spinoff from David Ryken. And I'll show you quickly how effective curiosity really works in these. So in the first two, preliminaries and objection handling, asking questions is really what I call, it goes down to the hands principle, which is about layering but also coming back up for air. And I love this idea of the hands principle. So think if you have a hand, and there are 5 reasons that a customer might want to do business with you. And so you have a call to prospecting with them, and you learn about this first one very quickly. You say, oh, what are the reasons, what are the problems you're having? And you learn and you start to ask layering questions, which is, oh, tell me more about that, like how much is that causing you, what are the problems, what are the benefits? If you don't come up for air, and by that I mean if you don't ever ask and stop going down this deep path and ask, what are the other things I could think about? Then you'll never learn potentially about these other 4. And even though you know a heck of a lot about this first one, you might actually be missing out on these ones, which are overall more important for you. And the funny thing is, a lot of salespeople, they'll be like, okay, I get it, so I'll ask one question, they'll get one more answer. But they won't ask the next one. And they won't ask the next one after that. And often they're missing probably what's the most important one to the person. That's going to be the deal breaker that we didn't address when we get to a closing. And that's where all the frustration of selling comes from. When you get to actually building your presentation and presenting your value and closing, there it's really about making sure that you're willing to ask for guidance and help along the way. You're willing to check in and see how you're doing. Just because you had a conversation and you learned a ton about someone a few weeks ago, and now you're coming in and doing a customized presentation, it doesn't mean that you actually have all the answers to that customized presentation. Make sure you're still checking in and still engaging. Even if you have a pitch, it should never be you talk the whole time and they just sit there. What if things have changed? Have things changed? Are there other things we should be thinking about? And when we come to closing, this is the thing people are always worried about. They've done all this talking and they've built a relationship. They don't want to ask. They don't know how to close. And the funny thing about it is it's as easy as that. Literally, just ask, are you ready to do business with me? And if you don't think you're quite there yet, you can say, on a scale of 1 to 10, I really want your business. Where do you think we are in this process? How close are we? And when they tell you you're an 8 or you're a 4, and you say, okay, tell me about that. How can I get closer? What is it going to take for me to get a 10? When you're going in to talk to someone else and you've built a relationship with someone, can you ask, do you have coaching for me? What should I do to be successful in this event? If you've built that relationship, they're invested in you. And so this is what I hope for you when you go out and sell. I'm going to tell you a story in a little bit about how I was able to employ effective selling, but it's that there are 2 things that I think keep people back from effectively selling in the world today. And it's 1, the fear of being perceived as incompetent, that asking a question is going to make them seem stupid. First off, you can do a lot of research to make sure you've covered that. And second, the other thing I want you to think about is that, what's the cost of not asking? What if I had gotten all of these answers, but I was missing these two, and I didn't check in on those? What would that do to me? Would that mean I lose the deal? Was that really so bad? Was it going to be so bad? Was it going to be so annoying that I asked that last question, that I sacrificed what was actually going to be a big learning for me? And so I've told you this stuff about selling, I've given you a little bit of a lesson here, but how does this apply in your life? And I'll run through a quick story. And it has to do with the fact that I was selling myself, and you're selling yourself, that sounds bad, but in any interview, you're really selling yourself. And I was applying for a fellowship with a professor at SAIS. And this professor, I had initial coffee with him to kind of get a feel out for the fellowship. I was really excited about it. And sort of at the beginning, in these preliminary stages, he made it sound like I wasn't really a good fit. He was going to be doing work in Africa. He was worried about having a woman there. He was also worried about my background. I hadn't lived internationally. And before, if I hadn't taken this class, I would have said, okay, I'm just going to let that go. I guess I'm not a good fit. But I started to ask why. I did something which is called the 5 questions. Okay, so what is your ideal solution? What are the problems you've seen in the program? What if we could solve those problems? What would that be of value to you? How would that impact what you're able to achieve with your research? And over the course of a 2-hour discussion, I was able to learn a ton about what he needs for his program and what a great candidate looks like. And so I went off and I built a customized presentation. And I had coffee with him again. And I started to talk about what I could bring to the table. And I was like, how is this, matching? Does this seem like what's in line with your needs? And he was starting to get more excited. We were actually having these interesting discussions. And he was, when we came to blocks, and I was like, yeah, but this, and he would actually start to propose ideas with how we could overcome that. And then I had coffee with him a 3rd time. And in that 3rd meeting, we were getting pretty close. I'd spent a lot of time with him. I said, look, I really want to go on this fellowship. Do you have any coaching for me? I'm going to apply. We have that official application, but do you have any coaching with me that's going to help me be successful? And there he gave me some more advice. And then I asked again, I didn't stop. What else should I be worried about? And so I applied, at the end of that month. And I was accepted in 3 days. And I got to spend the most amazing year of my life working in Africa with that professor. And that came from the fact that I didn't just accept at face value that even though he didn't think I was a good fit, I thought we could actually engage and that we could do something cool. And I went on that process of finding out, could we actually build something together? And ultimately we did, and it was a great experience for me. And so why I teach this, why does selling have to do with women in management? It's because this mindset, this openness, this willingness to ask the next question, I think it is fundamentally what often separates men from women in the workplace. It's what makes the difference between you getting that job and you closing that deal that you didn't think you were ever going to be able to close and not. The difference between an okay career and a great career. And I want you to ask yourself, what do you want? What kind of a life do you want for yourself? If you had to ask that last question, if that was going to make the difference between you being successful, would it be worth it? Would your fear of being nervous really be so bad? Your fear of being perceived as incompetent, your fear that you're going to be irritating, would the consequences of that last question be so high that you couldn't benefit from all the greatness that lies beyond? And so I hope you'll take this to heart, and I hope you'll think about how in life, in being curious and in being engaging, and bringing your whole self to the table, you can actually achieve a lot. Thank you so much. I have time for a few questions.